What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to bring you another one of my 2014 WCQ H.A.T format deck profiles. The deck I want to show off today is Chronomaly Artifact. In the OCG, this was considered one of the best decks during this time period. However, the unfortunate truth is, for us in the TCG, we didn't get one of the main cards this deck needed, which was Nebrodisk, until much later past H.A.T format. So unfortunately, this deck was missing its main starter of the deck that enabled a lot of really cool plays for the deck, along with one of their Xyz monsters, the rank 4 Xyz that would make the monster's attack of the opponent 0, which was used for one of the OTKs. But I wanted to look at this deck without the Nebrodisk, simply because I think the deck still is very solid, and it has a ton of potential, and usually the builds are mainly looking to do the very simple, usually about 2 cards with a little bit of setup OTK, and while this deck can do that, I still wanted to make it as competitively viable as possible, so I chose not to play some of the more gimmicky spell cards that some builds would play, trying to just fully pull off the OTK all the time. So this is a slightly more competitive version, in my opinion, without those gimmicky cards. So I'm extremely excited to show off this list. I've been having a ton of fun playing it, whether that's in person or online. And again, I think the deck has a ton of potential and still can OTK in a lot of cases. Hopefully by the end of this video, I'll explain that as well. But without further ado, let's actually get into the deck profile. So starting off, we play 3 copies of Chronomaly Crystal Skull. This is a searcher, the way we wish Nebrodisk kind of was for this format, except Nebrodisk was an odd normal summon. Chronomaly Crystal Skull has the effect that if you control a face-up Chronomaly monster, you can discard this card to the graveyard and add a Chronomaly monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except itself, and you can only use that effect once per turn. It being a rock level 3 is also very important once we get into the extra deck. After that, 3 copies of Chronomaly Crystal Bones. This card is really good, especially paired with your Crystal Skull in a sense. So what this does is if your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand, and when you do, you can special summon 1 Chronomaly monster from your hand or graveyard, except itself. So it's an extender that can get a monster again from your grave or hand, and there's no restriction on the monster it summons back. So you'll see that there are level 3s, 4s, and 5 Chronomaly monsters. You can just summon any of them with this, and you'll still have your normal summon, which is really good. After that, 3 copies of Chronomaly Golden Jet. This is one of the few normal summons that this deck actually does have in its current H.A.T format version, and what this one does is once per turn, you can increase the levels of all face-up Chronomaly monsters you currently control by 1. So on its own, it is a level 5, which works really good with some of the extender cards we play, along with being a light that can be a level 5, meaning you can use this with an artifact to actually go and make a Pleiades, which is really good. After that, 2 copies of Chronomaly Gordian Knot. This one is really cool. I kind of debated on playing 3 copies of this, if I'm being completely honest, because again, the deck doesn't have that many normal summons, but what this one does is, when it's normal summon, you can special summon a Chronomaly monster from your hand, and if you do, this card's level becomes the current level of that special summon monster. So the one thing is, again, it is a rock level 3, and the other thing with this is if you say summon a Golden Jet, what you can do is you summon this, summon the Golden Jet, they're both 4s, and then you can use Golden Jet, increase the levels, and make a rank 5, or you can make a 4, or if this summons just a 5 in general, that we'll get to in a minute, then you can just go straight into a 5. It's just a really important piece of the deck, and it works with a lot of your other cards, especially, again, say you have the Crystal Bones, you special it, special some other Chronomaly, and then you go and summon this, summon a 5, and now you have the OTK combo on live, basically, which is really cool. So 2 of this is really good. After that, the last Chronomaly is 2 copies of Chronomaly Moai. This one's really simple. It's basically an extender, and it says if you have a face-up Chronomaly monster, you can special summon this card from your hand in face-up defense position. So a key thing to note with this one is, unfortunately, it's an Earth, so it doesn't work as well as you would like with some of the other cards in the deck, but what's nice is it's not once per turn, so if you have 2 of these in hand, you can special both. It also, again, works with the Chrononaut, where if you normal that and then special this, you can now make a rank 5, which is nice. And there's a couple other plays that I'll talk about when we get to another card that I'm playing in the deck, but that is it for the Chronomaly monsters. Moving on, for the artifact package, 3 copies of Moraltech and 1 Beagletech. I wanted to keep the artifact engine in this as simple as possible. I didn't want it to be too bricky. Obviously, we know what all of these do by now, hopefully, but in general, you set them to your back row as spell and traps, and then when they're destroyed on the opponent's turn, you're able to special summon them back. And when they're specialed on the opponent's turn, Beagletech can pop up to 2 of your own set cards, and Moraltech can pop a face-up card non-targeting. I've been really liking this. I don't think this deck necessarily needs Scythe, though if you want to play Scythe, you can. Again, I just wanted to keep it very simple for the artifacts. After that, I play 2 copies of Max C. You could play 3 of this. I think card advantage is really good in this deck. So I think, if you wanted to play a 3rd, you can, but I didn't want it to be too bricky when your actual engine in this deck is very important. So it's kind of contradictory. You want your opponent to go off if you're trying to pull off the OTK combo. So having more cards, and if you drop Max C under that, is good. However, again, I think 2 is the perfect number. If you want, I am playing 1 more monster, and you could cut this for the 3rd Max C if you really wanted to, but the last monster I'm playing is 1 copy of Birdman, and honestly, this card is so good in this deck. I can't explain how many different combos this enables on its own. For example, if you go for Crystal Bones, Bones has the effect to special a Chronomaly from hand or graveyard. So let's say you summon it back from graveyard, a copy of the Golden Jet, and you use Golden Jet to increase the levels of the Chronomalys by 1. So Golden Jet is now a level 5. You can then use Birdman to bounce the Bones, so you have follow-up for the next turn, and now you have a level 3 Tuner and the Jet, so you're able to go and Synchro Summon for a level 8, which I'm playing Beals. There's other situations where if you use, say, Bones to summon back a copy of Skull, bounce the Skull, summon this, and then because you still have a Chronomaly on board, you can send the Skull and get a search. There's just a lot of other plays too that work really well with this, and that's why I think this card is really good. Again, it also works well with the artifacts, being, you can use this as a level 3 tuner just to synchro with them. It also works cool with the Moai. If you say normal summon anything like a Golden Jet or something, and then you can special the Moai, bounce the Moai, summon the Birdman, and then resummon the copy of Moai. So just really good there as well. And that is it for the monsters. For the spells, 2 copies of Ignition. Again, I didn't really want to be bricking on the artifact stuff, and I've talked about how I feel about Ignition in general and too big of an artifact package, so I think 2 is the perfect number for this deck. If you want, you could play more. I almost consider just playing MSTs, and if that was the case, I'd probably try to find room to play 3 MST, but 2 Ignition has been working really well for me, and it hasn't been super bricky. 2 copies of Forbidden Lance and 2 copies of Chalice. So I'm playing 2 Lance just because when you want your combos to go through, Lance is just a great card. This has won me a lot of games just with simple interaction against back row decks and stuff. And then Chalice is just really good because this deck kind of needs certain effects to go off, and if your opponent tries to interrupt that with artifacts, you want to have an answer, but also, in certain cases, you'll actually go and Chalice your own monster, and it'll give you just enough damage to go for the OTK, so kind of weird in that case, but overall, very good cards there. After that, 2 copies of Instant Fusion, just as another extender. We play only 1 target in the extra deck, which is why I'm only playing 2 of this, and it's a level 5 that will help you go for Pleiades or just other rank 5s in general, so very good. After that, 2 copies of Soul Charge. In some ways, I'd almost consider wanting to play one of this, because there are several cards, for example, the Crystal Bones that are going to summon from grave, and, you know, the artifacts summon themselves from grave, plus I'm playing, like, Call the Haunted, because we are playing the artifacts. But you can actually use Soul Charge and OTK your opponent almost without even needing to go into the battle phase, which is kind of funny because of one of the extra deck monsters. So I think 2 is really good. And the last spell is 1 copy of Mind Control, simply because this deck plays 3s, 4s, and 5s. Moving on to the traps, we play 3 copies of Sanctum. Obviously, being able to summon your artifacts from deck is really good, and if your opponent destroys this card, then you're able to pop a card on the field. 2 copies of Call the Haunted. This works obviously mainly with the artifacts, but also just bringing back, say, a Chronomaly to then summon a Moai, or, you know, use the effect of a Jet to have another 5 on board, or just a ton of things. Just being able to recur your stuff is nice. And after that, the last 4 cards are just basic staples, being Bottomless, Compulse, Torrential, and Warning. Now, moving on to the extra deck, we play 1 copy of Gaia Dragon, just to stack on top of your 5s. 1 copy of Zenmayo to pop set cards. 1 Tiras. 2 copies of Pleiades for the artifacts and also just the plays with Golden Jet. 1 copy of Volcasaurus. This is another burn card, which is really nice in this deck. 1 copy of Artifact Durendal. One of the nice things about Durendal in this deck is if we happen to brick on one of the artifact monsters, it's really easy to make a rank 5, and this being a generic 5 means you can use your Moais and just any 5s you need, really, to make this. And then the last rank 5 I'm playing is 1 copy of number 33 Chronomaly Machu Mech. This is your OTK enabler. What this one does, I'll pull it up here so you can see it. Once per turn, detach 1 Xyz material from this card to target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Inflict damage to your opponent equal to the difference between its original attack and current attack. And if you do, this card gains attack equal to the damage inflicted. Very good card. This will make a little more sense once we get into some of the next cards. So I'll talk about this again in a little bit. Next, I play 2 rank 4s, being Exciton and Dweller. There's not that many rank 4s, but technically if you have something like the Gordian Knot plus a Jet or just 2 Jets, you can make these. I'd almost consider swapping the Exciton for a 101, though I think Exciton is just a like last resort type card that's necessary. So that's why we play those. Next, for the 3s, I play 1 copy of Mechwhip Engineer. This could technically be an Alucard, but I think for now I've been liking the Engineer. And then the most important rank 3, that is why I kind of pointed out the Rock and level 3 synergies, is 2 copies of Gorgonic Guardian. This is the second part of the OTK, and this card's honestly insane. This is why we don't play things like Breakthrough Skill, because this is basically just a Breakthrough Skill, but better in a sense. So this is a rank 3. It needs 2 level 3 rock monsters, so, you know, things like your Gordian Knot, your Crystal Skull, and Crystal Bones. It's really easy to make, and so what this does is once per turn during either player's turn, detach 1 Xyz material from this card, target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, its attack becomes 0, and if it does, its effects are negated. So being able to switch the attack to 0 is really good. Obviously, you can see the Machu Mech synergies now. You make an opponent's monster, I believe it's 2,000 or 2,100. You turn it to 0, Machu Mech will burn them for that 2,000 or 21, and it'll gain the attack, and then you just swing with this and the Machu Mech, and you have game. And then the second part of the effect is, well, besides the fact that the negating effect and making the attack 0 lasts until the end of this turn, it has once per turn target a monster on the field with 0 attack and destroy it. So if anything, you can even just pop a monster if you make this and make the attack 0, which is extremely good in this deck. And also, I guess, just to, in case you wanted a little more clarification, the fact that it switches the attack of a monster means it can be used in damage step as well, so always good. And the last two cards are the one copy of Beals. It's just a really big card, and like Beals plus the Gorgonic Guardian means you can get a lot of damage in, and it's just, again, hard to out. And then the instant fusion target is the Ojama Knight, simply because it's a level 5 light, so it helps you make Pleiades. So that is it for this deck profile. Again, really cool deck, lots of potential, and I do have a couple other versions of this, so if you want to see the more OTK based or the more level 3 based versions, definitely let me know in the comments section. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out. Leave comments, I always like hearing your feedback on videos you guys want to see, or just anything like that. And anyways, guys, I will see you in the next video.